a tech fair because I get to see stuff that I would never buy, and yet I'm amazed that I'm sure there'll be a hovering drone version of the table. I sit down and it's like, I sit down, I want that, I want that, I want that. I can't afford that. How are you?
So where would you rank Harley Quinn in the pantheon of the legacy of this show? Is it the best legacy of the show, or is it one of several that you promised?
I think the best legacy of the show is the show itself, and the fact that it keeps coming back. You know, now it's at the point where it is almost like a classic, like a Disney classic movie, or the Looney Tunes, or something like that. And I think Harley is a wonderful bonus part of it. But again, like the Looney Tunes, it's like, you know, what's the biggest contribution? Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Bugs Bunny? I can't really say, but just the fact that it's all there is great. And certainly, it's grateful to hear somebody like Jim Lee saying, well, the big trio of the DC universe is now, you know, a foursome because we've added Harley with Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman.
Would you like to see a more accurate to your creation portrayal of Harley Quinn on the live screen or in an upcoming show?
Certainly, as long as it. First off, I think the tone of whatever the movie is has got to work, and then Harley can work within that tone. And if it's a funny movie, if it's an over the top action comedy, if they did something like Deadpool, for example, and she was the chaotic element of that, I think she could work very well in something like that. If you have a very dark Batman movie, do what we would do in the animated series. We'd put her in there very specifically to put a laugh or make a lighter moment so that it wouldn't be so gruesome and grim. You have to make sure that your world holds together, and then you put an element like her in there, I feel.
I love the animated series. What to you is the difference between writing the comics and writing the Batman in the animated series? Your versions are very different, and your runs on the detective and things like that.
Well, in animation, you can't write as much dialogue as you could for comic books, and that's sometimes I find I have a problem with that when I'm doing a comic book, is that I'll write in a very minimalist style as if I'm writing the animated series again, and then I'll go like, am I giving the reader enough, because it's a different experience. Each experience I've had, comics and then video games, like with Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, have been learning processes because the rules are different. When I started writing the video games, I was writing way too much, and I was writing a lot in the cutscenes, and the story director would say, you got to pace it out or know when to cut it out. So the first one was a learning experience. I think I got it better for the second one. And with comics, it's the same way. It's like you have a lot of real estate to fill up. You can go on a bit. You can have a little bit more texture, because ultimately you're playing director as well as a writer. Whereas in animation, you're part of a team, and the storyboard artist has his say, and the director and the voiceover artist too. So you're not carrying the ball alone.
Do you find your scripting is different for each then, when you're like writing a script out for each of them?
Sure. And you know, when I write a script, I'll go through it before recording, and I'll try and cut out as much dialogue as I can. You know, I don't want to rob the voice actors of saying, you know, jokes or fun dialogue, but at the same time, I don't want to find I'm repeating myself, or that they're drawing, you know, animating stuff that just doesn't have to be recorded, because it's just eating up time, and that's the story that the pictures can tell.
Whose take on Harley Quinn has kind of impressed you the most, whether it's in the comics or in media?
Oh, I really love what Jimmy and Amanda did. Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor. I thought they really took the character and made her their own, and they made her. You know, again, I go back to looking at these things like the old Warner Brothers directors. There is a Friz Freleng take on Bugs Bunny. There's a Chuck Jones take on Bugs Bunny, and they're all right. You know, and then there's the Screwball Tex Avery take, and they're all true to the character, but they all find different things to bring out in the character, different nuances. Chuck's is a more, I would, for lack of a better term, maybe a little more cerebral take than Texas, which is all out, you know, comedy and action. And yet you watch them side by side, you laugh, and they're both good. But I love what they did with her as far as turning her independent and someone who could say anything. And every time they teamed her up with another hero or heroine, it always felt like a true moment.
When you're writing for a book, you can't hear what the reader's voice is. When you're writing for a show, now you can hear somebody's voice on it.
Right.
Can you kind of explain what that's like to hear your words and your ideas kind of come out of somebody else's mouth and then put that performance on it?
I've been lucky in the almost 100% of the time. It's always been the right choice, and I've been lucky enough to work with actors who almost always get it. Every once in a while, you might have to work with somebody who's just playing it a little off in your mind, but then you work with them and you get it back in. And when I hear it spoken, I'll go like, oh, that funny joke that made me laugh for a week, that just died. Okay, out it goes. Rewrite it real quick. Or I'll get some nuance that'll just put me on the floor, and I'll go like, oh, I never even saw that coming, but now this sort of redefines the episode for me. So I don't know. To some degree, good writing is good listening. You listen to what the actor does, and you either rewrite on the spot, or you'll keep it in your mind and sort of write to that the next time you bring it in.
In regards to the Blu-ray,
Yes.
Is it just the 85 original episodes, or what, in addition to that, is included in the special features or other items?
It's 109 episodes, and so it takes in virtually everything we did with Batman, and it also has Mask of the Phantasm and Sub-Zero on it, and a 1-hour documentary and interviews with the cast and crew, and a lot of bonus features. I'm sure they've opened up the vault, and you'll see a lot of conceptual art and development art, and I gave them one of my scripts, and they rendered that in, so I guess you can click on that and read my original script for Heart of Ice, and so
Do you have a favorite episode?
Heart of Ice, and probably Almost Got Him is probably number 2. There are so many personally that I loved that I have trouble, picking a favorite. But those 2 are top 5, I would guess.
Now, did you record any new commentaries for the episodes for the Blu-ray? Or?
I didn't. No, Bruce and Alan may have, but I didn't. They might use the old commentaries that we've done from other versions. So, but we did do a new featurette, and which we just did about a month ago.
When you think back to that original script, and then to now, just how iconic in and of itself the world that you built through the writing, could you have ever imagined it? And kind of how did it make you feel?
Well, I don't think you can really plan on something like that because you're just doing it. You got a job offer. You want to do another season of Tiny Toons? You want to work on Batman? Well, there's one on Batman. Bruce and Eric. Okay, I'll do Batman. That sounds like fun. And I like Batman. So it wasn't quite that simple, but we're there. We're working, and we have an opportunity, so let's make it the coolest thing that we can. But again, nobody really counts on these things as becoming iconic. You're blessed when it happens and when it goes on, and people remember you 20, 30 years after the fact. But I think the more you try in some cases, the more you try and ensure success, the more you're not necessarily going to fail, but it'll be whatever it is that vision that you put down and are very rigid to. And in many cases, that may not play beyond that time. So Batman, it was a success because a lot of different creative people brought different things to the table. They brought their enthusiasm for the character, they brought their artistic talent, they brought a sense of wanting to experiment and just love of the character, and it all worked. And I think when you're crafting something from those elements, and there's nobody really telling you no, you don't do this, no, don't do that, you're gonna get something that's really very special.
Can you talk a little about the influence of the old Superman Max Fleischer shorts and what you were thinking about? If you ever thought about those while making the show?
Oh yeah, sure. We would watch those occasionally, and we'd look how they staged certain things, how they would play certain things for drama, about how there was very little dialogue, and there was next to no subtext in the story. So there was no B story or anything. And in a way, it's really very flat and in some ways sexist and just of the Time. Clark and Lois meet up at I think it's like a jewelry exhibit. She goes, "What are you doing here, Lois?" "Well, getting the woman's point on the story." It's like, really? That's all you're doing? I mean, that's your line of dialogue, other than help when the villain kidnaps her. Yeah, she's spunky to a degree, but it's of the time, and it's what they were, and that was. So you don't look at it for that at all, because you don't realize you can add so much with them as characters, and they have evolved so much over the years. That was really one of the very first popular depictions of Superman outside of the comics. But we would look at it for things like setting and backgrounds, and there was one cartoon about a guy impersonating Superman, and you've got this gangster sitting at a table and in a dark office, and we marveled at that because it's a circle of light. The gangster's sitting there like this, and then the stooge who's dressed in the Superman costume walks into the light. And he's going, "Well, say something stupid," and then the light tips up and it's really Superman. And that is a great moment. That's a very noirish directorial moment. So we look at things like that and go like, what's our answer to that? So you would have somebody going in, opening a closet, and then they'd shut it, and then the mirror in the door, Batman's standing behind them. We're not taking the moment directly, but what's our nod to it, and how does that make us think? So we would look at the cartoons and say, what can we learn from this? How can we think? How can we make it better?
Can we expect a Superman or Batman Beyond Blu-ray soon?
Well, I hope that would be nice. I mean, I think a lot of that is dependent on how this one does, and I'm certain the opportunity will exist at some point. And my boss is tapping me out, so I gotta go.
Thank you.